Area Chamber of Commerce, and we'd like to thank Cable Access TV for covering the event tonight. And what will happen is that the program will be presented on their station for the rest of the week, so the public will be able to have a chance to see it for next Tuesday's election. The format for this evening is the candidates will have an opening statement lasting 3 minutes, and they will be in order of the draw. They just took the draw, and we'll begin with that. Then we'll have a questions and answer period from the audience. You can ask, as we prefer, one candidate, but if you have to get an answer from all of them, we'll live with it. And then we'll have a final minute and a half closing statement. So this evening we're going to start with the school board and take probably a 10-minute break, and then go with the city council candidates. So, I'd like to begin with who had number one. Susan?
Yes. Thank you. I'm Susan Lozier, and I've been a lifelong member of Lebanon, except for like a year up in California. I'm very devoted to Lebanon. I love Lebanon. I grew up here. I'm very happy here. This would be I'm asking to be elected for my second term on the school board. I initially ran, because I was concerned with some of the changes that were being proposed at the high school with regard to, in particular, the unleveling of the social studies. And that, Al actually encouraged me to run, and so I did. And I got on the board, and we really dove into what was going on at the high school and really examined what was driving the proposed changes, and we really kind of put the brakes on there, and that did not happen. The changes, the unleveling did not occur. I was very pleased with that. We also have had some changes with our administration, and I'm delighted with the new superintendent we have and our curriculum directors. Another reason that I ran as well is that my mother was a teacher in the Lebanon School District growing up, so I very much know how hard teachers work, and I'm very supportive of our teachers. But at the same time, now that my parents are older, and they're very much on fixed incomes, I'm very sensitive and aware of what's happening to our, to the people that are on fixed incomes, not just our elderly. And I feel that I try to add a voice of balance when I come to school board meetings. And really, when it comes to budget review, I'm a real stickler on budget review, and I feel that's very much a part of my job. I've served on the education committee, and I'm delighted with what is happening with our curriculum at the high school. I really feel that we're becoming a very strong school again, and I'm thrilled by that. I would like to be elected to continue the work that I've been so fortunate to be a part of thus far. So thank you very much for coming and for your time. I don't know if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Who's number two?
Tammy.
Tammy.
Yep. My name's Tammy Beacon. I am also a lifelong resident of Lebanon. I went to Sacred Heart School, and then I went on to School Street School, the old junior high, Lebanon High School. I was fortunate to play sports from the get-go at Lebanon. I live in West Lebanon with my husband Peter. He works at Mascoma Savings Bank. We have two boys, one in the 7th grade, one in the 8th grade, and they are also very active in sports. I was encouraged to run by some friends on the school board, some friends, teachers, and family members. I don't have any particular objective, so I can't go tell you what I want to do. I just would tell you that I intend to listen to anything that's presented to us, be objective about it, and I will vote how I think is most appropriate for the school, any other parties involved, students, and residents of Lebanon.
Thank you. Number 3. Christine?
I joined the Lebanon School Board 6 years ago, the same election that passed the middle school. And serving on the board, I have learned a great deal about our district and how to promote actions that benefit our students. The reason I'm running for a 3rd term is to continue working to improve our students' learning experience.
Al?
All right. Well, good evening. And I'd like to first thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. I think this is a great event for everybody to be able to come out and participate in this. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy time to come here and sit and listen to the candidates. That's important. And thank you for being here. I was on the school board a few years ago. I participated in the new middle school. I served on the finance facility, and I also served in negotiations, which for those of you that have participated in any type of negotiations, especially with a union contract or those things, it can be very cumbersome. And you have to really be able to unite people and work together. One of the reasons why I run is because I've been a police officer for about 22 years, and I'm currently a member of the armed forces, so I get to see a lot of the younger generation. And I really think that education is so important. I mean, it's one of the most important things, and it's what really gets us by and gets us through in life the difficult situations. So I really support that. And I just enjoy being a part of making the decisions. Some of them are easy, some of them are not so easy. But I think I have a lot to offer. I have a lot of experience on the board in just finances, budgeting that I've done in the past. So I believe I have a lot to offer in the times to come. I've seen some really good positive changes in the last year and a half in regards to the surplus, and things are starting to move in a direction that I think is more conducive to what this community wants and expects, and more importantly, what's good for the students. And so that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Anybody have any questions you want to ask? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Loud enough so we can hear it.
So I'm currently a member of the school board, and the question that I had is, what qualities or characteristics do you bring to the board that you view as positive attributes to be on a board?
That's for everyone?
Sure.
Okay. Who's one? We'll do it the same order.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Wendy. Let's see. I believe I'm a good listener. I know when it comes to the budget, I'm very, number one, I'm passionate about it, but number two, I take it very seriously, and I take that 3-inch binder and I go through it line by line, just because I believe our students obviously need a wonderful education, and I just want us to make sure that we're spending the money or allocating the monies in the best way to make that happen. Let's see, what else are some good qualities? Let's see. I think I'm congenial, and I think I'm fair, and I try to hear both sides of any argument. Whatever we're discussing, I really do try to be open to each side has to have, each side offers to whatever the issue is we're discussing. And in that way, I think, I'm able to come to the best decision, the best vote that I may be asked to make.
Thank you. Sue?
I am actually a paralegal for TomTom, so in that job, I constantly negotiate contracts with attorneys, with people, with companies. So I am also a very good listener. I try to be objective, listening to their point of view, trying to take into consideration the impact of what they're asking for and what the effect will be, whether or not we pass it or don't pass it, what the effect will be both ways. So I would obviously try to decide on anything, keeping in mind my connections to the community, the boys in school, and my history with Lebanon.
Well, one of the things about me is that before I had kids, I did teach, so I'm familiar with the whole thing about, what you have to do as a teacher and my brain is still in that mode about what is the best thing to do in order to improve student learning. I've had 4 kids go through the district. My youngest is a senior this year, so I have a sense of what works and what hasn't worked in the district. And one of my favorite things is learning. I really think that learning never ends, and so I really think what we need to do in school is promote that so that kids don't feel that they're bored. Why do I have to learn this? That's a popular question. And I think we need to be able to answer that. And especially right now with all this talk about 21st century learning, I'm not sure a lot of people have a sense of what the answer to that is. What is 21st century learning? Some people say it's being able to use technology better. Well, 100 years ago, technology was a paper and pencil. It's still a paper and pencil. So what exactly does 21st century learning mean? I think that's an important discussion that we should be having. So I enjoy learning, and I want to be able to allow students to enjoy learning also.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm very fair. For those that know me, I'm very fair. I look at things objectively, and I believe in complete transparency from the board to the community and staff. And I think that when you lose transparency, you lose trust within the community, within the voters, within the students, within the staff. And that's one of the things I always strive to achieve and bring to the table is encourage people to have that transparency. I'm also a good listener. 23 plus years of law enforcement, you have to listen or you'll never get your job done. And another thing too that I think I bring to the table is in this day and age, although we don't like to talk about it, we have some safety concerns at our schools. And we have people that want to cause harm. So there's certain precautions that have to be taken to keep our students safe, our staff safe, and why they're in there providing the education for our kids. And I have a lot to offer in regards to that. I've been to the NIMS training, a lot of the trainings throughout the state to learn what's some of the protocols and how things should be done. Not that we shouldn't rely on our local law enforcement and other agencies to help us facilitate these types of safety measures, but it's always good to have someone that kind of knows how they work and the practicality in regards to how you can apply it to the school system. So I think I bring that to the table, and I'm very dedicated. I'm there, I put the time in, and we'll certainly do be there and do that. So that's about it.
Thank you. Saw another hand somewhere there. Yes, sir.
Go to the mic.
Hi, I'm Tom Corman. I am in my 24th year of teaching computer science at Dartmouth. I'm teaching our introductory course right now for my 22nd time, which is to say this is my 22nd time teaching students who are 1 year removed from high school. And the question I have for all 4 is, how do you see technology in the curriculum at the high school? In particular, I'm thinking about teaching coding skills, programming skills, which are going to be not only essential going forward, but also provide students a way to be able to think very precisely and communicate very precisely. So what sorts of changes do you see in the curriculum toward that level of technology?
Wow. Boom. This is a subject that is, and forgive my answer, but coding itself is somewhat foreign to me. Thank you. I tried it, way back in high school, like Fortran 77. I don't know if you're, hello. And it, blew me away. However, I appreciate your question. Thank you so much, because this is something that we really need to kind of dive into, I think, a bit more. We do have a coding club. With regard to our curriculum, I see us moving towards this. We've put a lot of money aside into our budget so that we can start gearing up and getting our kids, at least tech savvy. Now, my son is thoroughly into coding. It blows my mind, and he's a junior at the high school. So I hear this, and I know there is the need for it. At the same time, we have to measure how plugged in are all these kids for this. And I think it is something that's growing. So, I'm pretty confident we're going to need to be addressing this, soon. Right at the moment, I don't have a better answer than that. So, I'm sorry, Tom, but thank you for bringing it up, because that is something very much on the forefront that we're going to have to start dealing with. So thank you.
Amy?
And I as well don't have an answer. My kids are in the junior high. They don't, technology to them is their textbook is now on the computer. So I don't know anything about the high school, what they offer in the high school. I don't know about the coding programs. Sorry, I can't answer.
Christine?
Actually, technology in the district has been a subject for me. I bring it up regularly at either the EC meetings or at the school board meetings. I agree that we should be working on teaching more different computer languages in school, because as I have experienced with my children who have graduated, they feel like they're behind when they get into classes in their college majors, that other kids at least are familiar with them, even if they're not experts. And like I said, I bring it up regularly at class in board meetings, and for one thing, I think we need to do a better job of supporting our teachers to learn how to use the technology that we already have in the district. Since I'm on the board, we've already gone digital with a lot of the tools that we use, but teachers either don't feel comfortable or don't want to move towards using them in the classroom. So it's a problem. I mean, when I was a teacher, I taught basic to kindergarten through 8th grade students. And that was 27 years ago. So I know that it can be done. So I don't know what the holdup is. Like I said, it's probably getting our teachers educated and comfortable teaching our students about it. Or more involvement from the community that wants to have this happen in the district, so that we don't have to do everything in the classroom. That's one of the things I think is part of a better learning experience for the kids, that we should have community members come in, or students able somehow to go out in other places to learn this, because we may not have all the ability to have that in our classrooms. Maybe it's too expensive, maybe it doesn't make sense because the technology changes too fast. I'm not sure, but I agree, it needs to happen, and I don't know when it's going to happen. But I do bring it up regularly. Thank you.
No?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I mean, I'm going to echo some things, and I would like to say that I commend you for the comment you made about going out in the field and working with other employees and jobs, because in my business we have a lot of computers, laptops, everything's very, very technical. And it's getting more and more so. So if you don't know that or aren't good with computers, you're behind the curve, so to speak. But I think I will say I think it's very important. But to speak on behalf of what the board's up to now, I'm a little out of the loop, but it's certainly something I did support when I was on the board and would continue to support if I was back on the board again.
Thank you. Saw another hand somewhere? Yes, sir. To the mic, please.
I guess this is for all four. The cost of educating, on average, a child in Lebanon is significantly higher than the average in the state. Could you just speak to costs and controlling costs?
Yes, that's that's a fact that can be hard to get your head around. And this, I have to be kind of delicate here. I believe that a certain portion of that may be driven by our special needs students, and there's a significant cost in educating students with special needs. Other than that, it's like, I look at that budget every year. So in the 3 years that I've been on the board, I've looked at that budget and I've looked at that budget, and I've tried to figure out how we can, keep it flat, if not reduce it, keep it at least flat. And this year, I believe we are making headway with that. But it's a question, because it's like the product that we're putting out there, why is it costing per student so much in Lebanon, versus necessarily, Hanover or Hollis or Kearsarge? I mean, that is a very fair question, and, that's the only right at this moment answer that I can probably give.
For me, again, being new, I don't have any experience with the cost per student with relation to other schools. What I would say is that if I was elected, I would have a fresh mind going into it, looking at how it's allocated, what the costs are, how they're used, comparing it to other schools, and seeing how we could maybe come down with relationship to what others did. But I just don't have any experience on the school board, so I don't know the particulars about the expenses.
As I've been on the board, I've learned that there's more to the cost of educating a student than just educating the student. We have we've consolidated buildings, and in the past we had multiple buildings that weren't being used to capacity, so we've had to close those, and then moving those buildings around cost money. Our special ed costs money, and of course now we're learning how to control some of those costs. We've made some changes in the way we do our budget, in that we put money into a fund so that if we do have emergencies, we can use the extra money later on. And even when I first was on the board, and I remember this meeting talking about how at budget season, we talk about how we return money to the taxpayer, and we did it again then this year, about we don't really return money to the taxpayer. We actually, the money that wasn't used in the budget is held, and then that lowers the tax rate for the following year. So I don't like talking about the budget that way, that we return any money. It's just how it functions in the lines. So how much money it actually costs us is such a difficult problem to solve, that to answer that question here right now would take an hour. And part of it is that we are one of the districts that pays our teachers a higher salary than some of the other districts. We have not a huge district, but it's not small either. And there's just so many things that go into our budget that I don't even know where to start. I tried, but.
One of the things that I learned with the budget is I found that when I was involved in it, and accountability is a big issue, because when I would go through the budget, you would go down through the line items, and you'd have an item that was being purchased, and it was over budgeted by just a little bit sometimes, or overspent. And what would happen is for one individual mistake, that's not a big deal, but when it happens several times, it adds up, and that creates a problem. So if you have accountability when the staff are presenting their budget, you know, to put out a good number, that would help too. Also, you know, the other thing is too, is this, the district, and we do it in our police departments, but we take grants. So if you hire somebody on a grant for 2 years, you gotta remember that some of them, not all, some of them, you then have to keep them for another 2 years. So then even though you got something free for the first 2 years, you then have to pay for it for 2 years after that, and that is then, has to be added into the budget and paid for by the taxpayer. So that's where you see that it doesn't add up. So that's a hard thing, you have to really look at the grants. Now, most of them are very important, I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm just saying that these are some of the things that go on with the budget. And just when you're buying things, the bidding is something as simple as bidding. When I came on the board, one of the things that I pushed and it got to get done was to have a bidding process that when you went to have a job done or buy something, it had to be done the same way every time, and you had to have X number of bids put in so that you couldn't just go out and be irresponsible when you're getting a product. You still want to get a good product for the students in the district, but yet you want to make sure you're being responsible for the taxpayers. But there's just so much that goes into it. Those are just some of the things, and in the budget. So I would say, you know, accountability, transparency, and just really making sure that when you do get some of these grants, that it's really going to benefit. And like one of the board members says, make sure that it's really what you know. Measure the needs versus wants, and if it's really going to be beneficial, because at some point it may end up costing more, and that, you know, the budget goes up, and then people get nervous, which is, I understand that.
Thank you. Another hand that I saw out there? Yes, hand, maybe.
My question is for any candidate who might have the information. My question, how many varsity and JV teams, sports teams does the Lebanon School District have, and what percentage of the total budget is involved in those costs?
Anybody want to dare answer that one? Yeah?
My numbers would be outdated, so I wouldn't even want, I'm not gonna try.
Anybody else? Christina?
Don't have
No,
those
okay.
numbers memorized.
Susan?
Oh, I would just be guessing, and I
Okay.
really, I hate to do that.
Tammy? Don't either. Sorry, Mary Ann. Val, you want?
I would just, I mean, if I remember correctly, there's some board members like Mr. Peavy sitting in the audience there, I'm gonna call you out, but the hockey team, just that is, and I know that, I don't know what the varsity team was, but I know that the ice time, the rental for the ice, which would be part of that, I would assume, was somewhere around 50 or 60, what was it a year to do?
36,000 for
Okay.
champions.
That's just for the rental of the ice time? Yes. Not that that gives you your answer, but that helps give you kind of an idea of how quickly it adds up.
Right, but, you know, I'd be happy if you, I'm happy to give you, I mean, I'm right on the SAU, I'd be happy to get that number for you, email that to you if you'd like me to find that out for you. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Good evening. Dick Milius, I'm a current member of the school board. Paul, you asked us not to necessarily ask the question of all four people, so I'm particularly interested. I think I'm particularly interested in getting a response from Tammy or from Al, although I'll take an answer from anyone, as to all of you have had kids in the schools and long-term residents of Lebanon. My question is, what do you think the schools are doing especially well, and maybe an area that could use some work that we're not doing so well in?
Tammy, you want to start?
I think my kids went to Mount Leb. They were in kindergarten there, they went up through. They then went to Lebanon Middle School. They were both, Jacob was the first 5th grade class going into the new school. And I really don't have any complaints. I am very active in the school. The boys play a lot of sports. I'm there a lot. I volunteered a lot at Mount Leb. I used to go in with both classes every year. I would go in every day and do the science program. I'm not sure what it's called anymore. Yes. So I would go in weekly and do that. I love the Lebanon Middle School. I loved Mount Leb. They continue to give you an example, they do continue to make my kids work hard. Benjamin, the youngest, was exceeding in math, and 2 weeks into the school year, they moved him up to an advanced level math. So they were right on top of his scores, they were right on top of his homework. They moved him to a different class, they watched him as he became acclimated to the new schedule, the new learning material. And I email a lot. So I email their teachers, they're very responsive. Within a couple days, I get an email back. It might be about a missing assignment, a poor grade, what they did wrong. I honestly can't think of a complaint I have sitting here for you. I just have had great experience with the schools for both of the boys.
Al?
Well, my son's 27, so he's been out for a day or two, so I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of, anything current, but what I can tell you is I frequently utilize the services at the CCBA, and I get to see a lot of the high school kids that come in there afterwards, and all on different ages, and they seem like good kids. They're smart kids, they're working out, they're concerned about their health for sports. Granted, most of them are athletes, so, that's kind of expected that they're there, but I mean, I based on what I've seen there and out in the community for some of these kids, I think, the students appear to be happy and things are going well for them.
Thank you. Yes, Suzanne?
Dick, I'm delighted myself with Kellen as a junior, what courses he's, taking, what he's learning. And, so I'm thrilled. The other thing that I'm thrilled about is the culture, the feel I get of the camaraderie with the students. I mean, I hear that from Kellen and his friends when they're over, and that gives me a really good feeling about Lebanon, that Lebanon is still very much a family school. I do like that a lot.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, each candidate will have a 1.5-minute closing statement. And we'll go by the numbers.
Do you want to go in reverse? No.
You want to do reverse?
Well, again, I'm Susan Lozier. I have very much enjoyed my 3 years on the school board. I feel that my first year, I kind of was learning the ropes. My second year, I started to get a voice. This past year, I really feel like I've become more comfortable in the role of school board member, and really started to hone my skill at the budgetary process in particular. And I don't mean to keep coming back to that, but I feel that is a big part of our job. I also feel that I would just be delighted to continue and be elected for another term. So thank you for your time.
Kim?
I am running again because I have the voice in the school. I was encouraged by family and friends. I am completely green. I don't know how any of it works, so I will learn right from the get-go. I will listen and ask questions if I need to, and whether it be from former members, other committees. And I hope to be elected. I think I bring a lot with the boys in school, with growing up in Lebanon and knowing a lot of people around Lebanon.
Thank you.
I just want to say that remember to participate in the amazing process we have devised to allow each person to have a choice in our government and school district decisions. Please vote on Tuesday.
Thank you. Good. Al?
All right, I'm last.
Yes.
So I'll try to keep this short so we can, but I believe we, meaning the Lebanon School District, have the duty to provide great and meaningful opportunities for all the children within our district. as I truly believe education and knowledge is an essential ingredient to success. I said that earlier, and I truly mean it. I feel that a board member must not only be open-minded, but be fair, compassionate, and fiscally responsible. This should not only be done for the taxpayers, but more importantly, for the children to whom we are committed to educate. And I just feel with experiences that I've had, my prior time on the board and my time in law enforcement and in the military, I've served on many committees in the military, and when you work on committees or try to get things done, the one thing you have to do is be able to create dialogue and get people to get along, bring people together. Because if you can't do that, nothing gets done, and it makes it very difficult. And to me, there would be nothing worse than prolonging something when the kids of the communities are the ones that suffer just because you're not, moving forward because of whatever reason. So I think that I have a lot of experience in that, and I'm willing to do whatever I can to help move things forward and learn what I've missed in the last few years, and try to help out where I can and learn about, I'm sure things have changed. There's a lot to learn, but like knowledge is power, so I'm always trying to learn more about what needs to be done. So I'd hope.
Thank you. Time. Right on time.
See, I had that.
Okay, we thank you all very much for participating this evening. We will use the same format as we did for the school board candidates. Each candidate for city council will have a 3-minute opening statement, take questions from the audience, and then a 1.5-minute closing statement. So they've already taken their numbers, and number 1, Bruce, right? There we go.
I don't think I'll need 3 minutes. My name's Bruce Bronner. I'm currently the city council member for Ward 2. I'm seeking my 5th term. I would be 10 years. I wasn't born in Lebanon, but Lebanon is my home. I bought my house in 1983. Married a girl from Sunapee, raised 2 children, sent them both through the schools. They both have been to college and are now graduates and out on their own. I don't bring a personal agenda to the council. I bring an open mind and rational thinking. And I always will do what is best for Lebanon, which is not necessarily what makes you popular, but in the end run, what's best for Lebanon is what I think needs to be done.
Thank you, Bruce. And did you mention you were a candidate for what ward?
I'm sorry.
What ward?
Ward 2.
Ward 2. Okay, number 2.
My name is William Shoemaker. I'm running for the City Council of Lebanon for Ward 3. I've been living in Lebanon since 2008. I'm a new resident here and love the town. It's a small town. I am from a small town from South Carolina. I'm married to Dr. Anique Shoemaker. We both own a home on Hardy Hill Road next to the bridge there. I have 2 old adult sons that also live in Lebanon. I convinced them to move up to Lebanon, and one works at Dartmouth Hiscock, and my youngest son works at Workers Funeral Home. I currently work for the town of Enfield. I've been working there for 7 years. I manage the buildings, ground, and cemetery department. I'm also the town's cemetery sexton. I manage burials and I sell lots there. I'm also the town's tree ward. During the winter months, I work with the highway department, and I also maintain the work order system there. I collect all kind of data and work closely with the director of public works during budget times when we're trying to crunch the budget. When budget committee is trying to take money from us, so he comes to me, says, give me some data, give me to show them that we need this money, we need money for paving. So I work closely with him for that. I served in the Navy for 8 years. I was on ballistic missile submarines, served on USS Von Steuben, and USS Canopus out of Kings Bay, Georgia during that time. I left service and I became a police officer for 8 years, worked in that capacity, and at that time I moved on to own my own landscape company down in South Carolina, and I worked with a funeral home down there called Saul's Funeral Home. So that's where I learned the cemetery business. I decided to run because I've been living here for some time, and my concerns are with public safety, especially in the last 3 years. This year, the winter has been really slow, but I think we need to have more guys on the Public Works Department plowing our roads, because our roads are just horrible, and I get complaints all the time that, it seems like those guys need more help, and I'd like to see maybe we can get that to happen. Also concerned about the cemeteries. Some of our cemeteries are, I've seen them been up to a foot deep in grass. I know the cemetery on School Street needs a lot of attention, and I'd like to try to advocate for the cemeteries. And my major concern is the airport. The airport's losing money. It's costing the taxpayers a lot of money to keep it open. Frankly, I don't think Lebanon can afford the airport. I think all that money we spend in the airport can go to better uses in the town, like infrastructure. And if it can't survive on its own, why are we keeping it open? I think we ought to repurpose the airport to maybe industrial park, bring another manufacturer in, bring jobs. And I think we need a lot of jobs here. I know I'm probably not going to win because I'm totally against the airport. And I think I need to have another voice on City Council to voice the concerns about the airport. I do have some friends that live on Poverty Lane. They're totally against the airport. So, and my last thing, I think we need more affordable housing in Lebanon. When I started living here in Lebanon, I started in a little 400 square foot apartment on Bank Street. And it was like $500 a month for that apartment. So, and now that apartment, the last time I saw it in the paper, is $750. But incomes haven't rose that much since 2008. So I know it's a strain on the lower income working families. My 2 sons, it takes 2 full-time jobs for them to afford an apartment in Lebanon. So
Time go. Sorry. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Welsh, and I moved here in 2000 to Lebanon after 2 years in college housing at Dartmouth. That was enough for me. I have to tell you that Lebanon is a lot closer to a real New England city. I beg to differ with my opponent there. Lebanon is not a town. It is a city. And as a city, I have seen it over the last 16 years develop in a positive way overall. But the question of an airport is something that I have a great deal of opinion on that I will save for another conversation. Because it's important to me for you to understand the reason I'm running is because of 2 factors. With a great deal of credit to Professor Corman's wife. Nicole Corman was one of the finest public servants I have ever known. I did not always agree with her. In fact, most of the time I didn't. But she was the most dedicated woman in small city government I have ever met. Later, after her sad and very premature passing, I got to know Karen Leo Hill, a current at-large city councilor and a small business owner who, with her native-born husband Andy, are trying to do things for Lebanon on the ground level. She is a brilliant speaker, far better than I could ever be. She is an innate politician, something I will never be. Indeed, I never thought to run for city council until I started to listen to Karen. And another friend, Clifton Below, who was also on the city council, asked me if I would consider running. This is a very difficult decision for me. Despite 40 years in book publishing, emphasizing sales and marketing, I am not a public person. However, I think it is important sometime, indeed I was raised, sadly I'm a Flatlander, guys, I was born and raised in New York City. But I did go to college in Massachusetts, and I did go to summer camp in Maine, and I moved to Connecticut when I got sick and tired after 6 years of working after college in New York. And I lived in a very small town, so I know the difference between small towns like West Goshen, Connecticut, and cities like Lebanon. And what I want to stress here tonight is that Lebanon has changed a lot in 16 years. We have Ava, we have my friend, the Tui brothers, Hub. We have here, River Valley Community College, opening up this fall fully. We need to continue to provide housing and education and jobs for our young people. They are leaving in droves. Now that's the classic, symptom of New England living. You bring them up in a small city or a small town and then they go to Boston or somewhere else. That's fine, but they should come back here. The fact is, we need our young people to stay here, and without jobs and affordable housing, it just doesn't work. Why am I running now? Because after I couldn't get a job in publishing anywhere closer than Ohio, I came back home where my family and friends are, and I decided to take early retirement and go back to graduate school to learn business, which is what I'm in the middle of right now at my husband's university. My goal is to advise young people in business, to work with SCORE and other volunteer companies to be able to keep young people in town who want to stay here, who don't have to leave or move across the river or downstate or wherever to find affordable living and good jobs that pay right.
So, time.
Thank you.
What ward are you running?
Oh, sorry, Ward 3. Both my opponent and I live on Hardy Hill. I live at the top, he lives at the bottom.
Okay, great, thanks. Tip?
Thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Tim McNamara. I'm one of your at-large counselors. I am a Lebanon native. I have lived here for most of my adult life. I currently, and for the past 15 years, have worked at Dartmouth College, where I'm the Associate Director of Campus Services, handling a lot of the back of the house sort of construction and management of infrastructure at the college. I was last on the council previously in 1994, 1995. I then served on the planning board for the last several years, most recently as a chairman for a couple of years. I ran for the board last March to fulfill the remaining year of Nicole Corman's term. I'm running again this year to try to continue what I think we've started. I will never fill Nicole's shoes, but I've tried to do the best I can. I think that there's several things that have happened over the past year that have led me to sort of want to continue with the council for a while longer. One is this whole airport discussion. It has sort of held this city in its grasp for way too long. We need to resolve it. We have gotten a part of the way this year with the discussions you may have read about in the paper or seen on television relative to some improvements that are FAA mandated that we need to make. We held a vote on that very recently. I abstained from that vote, and the reason I did was that what was presented to us was billed as a comprehensive master plan for the airport, and in fact it was not a comprehensive master plan. It was a plan to fix some things that needed to be fixed per the FAA regulations. I think to have a comprehensive master plan, we have to talk about the entire economic future of the airport. We need to fully understand what land we own, what land we don't own, which has not been fully fleshed out yet. So I think we've got probably another 6 months to a year before we sort of finalize this, but my goal in the next year is to try to bring the airport discussion to closure. One of the other important things I think we've done this year is to finally hire a replacement city manager for Greg Lewis. We've had his replacement on board for going on 6 months now. He's still learning. He will still be learning for a while, I'm sure, but I think we made a good choice, and I hope to move forward with the same city manager now for several years and have some continuity. I think that another thing that I've really been encouraged by over the past year is my involvement in a subcommittee of the City Council, which deals with economic vitality. For a number of years, we've really had the issue of business perceiving that they were in conflict with city government. And this subcommittee was formed so that we would bring business leaders and representatives of the city together in a way that tried to promote the overall economic vitality of the city. And I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress. City Council recently voted on 79E, which is a way that we allow small business owners to make investments in their property while not incurring any liability to our tax base. I'd like to continue to do a whole lot more of that in the next year or two. Lastly, I think that one of the things we have not done very well with that we need to do better with is to integrate our operations with the operations of the school district. You know, we collect taxes from the same pocket, but then we divvy them into two pockets, and we don't always do that particularly efficiently, and we don't coordinate as well as we should. And I would like to see that develop over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, open it up to the public. Any questions to one candidate or all the candidates? Yes, Tom.
Tom Corman, I live in Ward 3, so I'm going to direct this certainly to Mr. Shoemaker because you addressed the airport, but also Ms. Welsh, if you care to address it. So, Mr. Shoemaker, you're advocating, as I understand it, for, let's say, ramping down on the airport. And as I understand it, if we were to close the airport, we would actually owe the FAA quite a bit of money. And I'm wondering how you would propose to pay back the FAA.
Well, that's a good question, but the thing is, if the airport's going to cost us, I think the budget's over $1 million, but now we got to come up with a $1.9 more million for 20 years. If it's continuing to lose money, would it probably be cheaper to pay them off and close it, and maybe utilize that land to bring in a manufacturer to maybe generate revenue that way? But it seems, I know this. We took the money 50 years ago, and it's probably, from what I've heard, it's been losing money since 9/11. But when did we quit? It's just sucking money out of the city. And why should the taxpayers subsidize the airport just to keep it open? Maybe we could talk our way out of the FAA and negotiate a settlement. But why do we keep kicking the can down the road and it's costing the taxpayers? Our taxes go up every year, but I just think we can better spend that money on somewhere else in the city. We can barely clear our roads now in the winter because we had to cut back on the Public Works Department. And I know they've been cut back over the years. And I remember editorial in the paper, when you want a pothole fixed, just call the police department because we just cut a bunch of guys from the Public Works Department. And have y'all been happy about driving around, Lebanon, not this year, but the last 2 years? It's just been horrible. You can't get, it's just, we have a daytime population of 50,000 people. I think we should have more guys on the road clearing. But the airport, if you have to raise taxes to fund it, that taxes come from all the taxpayers. So everything, when your tax bill goes up, if the landlord's tax go up, they have to pass it down to their renters. They have to pass it down to the small business people trying to rent a storefront. But look at all the storefronts right now in Lebanon that are empty right now. Shaw's, West Lab, look at the mall. When I moved here in 2008, there was a lot of stores open. Now there's a bunch been closed. A lot of them went out of business. I think small business is going to have a hard time. I know they're trying to get a program to help small business, but taxes, high taxes, takes too much money out of the economy, the local economy, and it's just, I know my opponent here wants to do an independent bookstore, but a bookstore just closed. How can you, it's just.
Mr. Shoemaker,
Yep.
if I may answer some of your comments and also answer Professor.
Yeah, I'm done. And just, like I said, I hope I answered the question. Yeah, I'm trying to bring a conservative view to the council. I want to save the taxpayers' money, and the airport's just.
Mr. Shoemaker, did you listen to the latest city council meeting from last month?
I read the article. So.
Well, you might want to take a look at the CATV filming, and I'll tell you why. Because a great deal of detail was given out at that meeting. Not everybody agreed with it. I know that my associates to my right had problems. One of them abstained, the other one voted against it.
Two voted against it, I believe. There was 2 votes against it.
Right, but the other man's not here. My point is this. There are a great many reasons why we cannot give up that airport. I do not profess to know them. I do not profess to understand them. One of the things I'm doing is working my way through all of the paperwork, it's in that bag back there, of the city reports about the state of the airport. I once flew into this airport. I've flown around the world, including landing on the side of a hill in Papua New Guinea, and I have never been so scared as when I landed in Lebanon, coming from New York. So I'm not a big fan of the airport, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter what it is as long as it becomes a zero-sum game. We need to get to the point where it doesn't cost us anything, but we cannot pay the FAA money we'll never have. So I need people to look at the reports that were done. If you haven't seen them, if you haven't listened to the city council meeting, I attended it specifically to hear about the airport and before tonight, you need to. It's our civic responsibility. Otherwise, you can't vote on it. Well, you could, but you'd be foolish. Number two, I live at the top of Hardy Hill. We moved there with two ancient cars. The top of Hardy Hill, if anything, is the least plowed area in Ward 3. The least plowed area. And why do we not complain? Because most of us realized that before we bought our houses. So we went out and bought, in any fashion possible, four-wheel drive vehicles. I am driving a 16-year-old, it's funny, it's the same age as my owning the house, 16-year-old RAV4 that is so rusted it's no longer white. But it gets me up and down the roads when they haven't been plowed. I have the same attitude towards Hardy Hill at the top as I do towards Poverty Lane. I have a friend who lives there, and we used to get into huge fights when we worked together at Dartmouth, and I said, the airport's been there longer than you have, Mike. Didn't you know the airport was there when you bought the land and the house? If you didn't like airports, why did you move there? In my tiny town of West Goshen, Connecticut, back in the late 60s to 80s when I was living there, first as a summer person, then as a weekender, then year-round, we had a selectmen committee. And Richie Kobolensky, may he rest in peace, was a selectman for my entire time here. That's like 20-some odd years, right? Well, Richie Kobolensky, when asked by a recent immigrant who bought a summer house on the cottage and complained about the snow removal, Kobolensky said, the good Lord put it there, and the good Lord's going to take the snow away. I learned that at a very young age, and I have to tell you, I've never forgotten it, because quite frankly, New Englanders have one, and I say this as a Flatlander from Manhattan, New Englanders have one of many great qualities. They are stubborn. Now, I come from a long line of New Englanders, even though I ended up being born in New York City by mistake. The bottom line is, put your money where it counts. Yes, I'd love better roads. Yes, I'd love to get rid of the airport. But you know what? Some things just are not possible. The Lord can take away the snow, or go out and buy a four-wheel drive vehicle. Trust me, I bought the cheapest one on the market at the time. You can do that. I work with young women in a retail store in West Lebanon, a small New England chain store. These women are getting kicked out of their rental apartments all over Lebanon and West Lebanon. Why? Because some landlord wants to charge them more money. And the only jobs these kids can get is retail. We need more stores. We need a higher living wage. We need to keep these kids, however they got here, whether they were born here or they were dumped by an ex-husband here who moved away to sunny Florida. It doesn't matter. The point is, these kids are the lifeblood of this town, this, forgive me, city. Keep in mind, Lebanon is not a town. It is a city. And as a city, it has big city problems. If we don't address this and forget Disney does quaint New England, we're never going to see the next generation of kids growing up in this town. And there goes your future.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'll have to rebut. So the airport is like, you made a deal with the devil?
Bill, at the end, in your closing statement. In your closing statement. Al, you had a question?
Try to keep it brief, but some things Al Patterson, Ward 3. First of all, thank you for your military service, both of you, and thank you all for serving and those who are trying to get on. I appreciate it. It's a hard job, and it's not easy. What I want to talk about is you're talking about, the airport's a whole nother story. It's a money pit, and I'm sorry, I don't agree that it doesn't matter what I agree, I'm not going to get into that. My question is this, is that with these potentially new housing developments, businesses, the draw for getting people to come to our community, with that comes the need for public service, fire, police, highway has to be out plowing Hardy Hill. Some of our areas is an elderly community. So some of these people, are not going to get, when they need an ambulance on Hardy Hill at the top, they need it right away. You can't wait for it to be plowed. You can't, these roads need to be maintained. So how are you planning to make sure that we're not just adding all this drain on our police departments and our fire departments without making sure that we have a impact fee that's adjusted and going to be appropriate to hire the proper help to maintain that draw?
Okay, to who, Al?
What?
And which candidate, or?
All of them.
Thank you very much. Number one, the kid.
Managing growth is a difficult problem. And making it so that you can still provide the services and people can still afford to live here takes some very good planning. Lebanon has an excellent planning department that is also got a master plan that was approved a couple of years ago that details a direction that Lebanon wants to go, where we are sustainable but still growing and able to bring new life and vitality to the city while maintaining the character of Lebanon, which is, it's a wonderful place to live. It truly is. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it is a solvable problem. The Economic Vitality Committee is one of the solutions. Our planning board is another solution. And being aware of a direction that we're trying to go and balancing all of these different issues is the most difficult part. I don't have a good answer for you, Al. It's a difficult problem, but we're working on it.
See, Al brings up good points. When emergency services need to get up to Hardy Hill to you, they don't have four-wheel drive. I think, you're going to want that road plowed, but since they have lost members of their plow crew, their routes are extended a lot more time. It takes one guy when they had, I think I remember Lebanon might have had 22 guys plowing the roads, but now they're like down to 10 or something like that. And when you take away from the guys that are doing the work, it increases their route times. And I think it's very important to shorten those route times so that we can always have the roads maintained, because you never know when you're going to need to get a fire truck up Hardy Hill Road to your house, my house, and if they can't make it because the road's not plowed and the fire truck crashes and slips off the road, that's a problem to me. And I know recently, if the Public Works, they just recently hired an assistant public works director. That's a lot of money. In his salary, why do we need a assistant public works director? And we could have took that money and maybe hired 2 other guys to help the highway guys. I don't know, I know some of the guys in Public Works, and I've heard in the grapevine, they're not happy. It's not a happy bunch. They are tasked to do more work with less guys. So I know it costs money to hire these guys, But I think, the budget, we can find money in the budget to add people to the public works department and to maintain our roads. And like I said, a lot of people can't afford four-wheel drives, like my son, plenty of people cannot afford four-wheel drives. They depend on the roads to be somewhat clear, maybe to get to work, to get to their part-time jobs or wherever they work in. I've known people. I had a neighbor. She was renting. She was working 3 jobs to make it ends meet and rent that apartment. But
Thank you, Bill.
yeah,
Sarah?
I don't know anything about Public Works. Obviously, I told you the Richie Kobylensky story. That's it as far as I know. But in fact, I do know something about budgeting. I did budgets in every one of the sales departments in 6 publishing companies over the last 30 years. And one of the things that I learned doing these budgets is you don't get everything you want. Well, you don't get everything you want at the time that you want it. What you do is you decide what is the most important thing, the thing that has to save lives. Now, if that turns out to be better plowing on Hardy Hill Road and some of the even worse roads in Lebanon, Sunset Rock, for instance, then maybe that's what it is. And luckily, I'm not voting, you're not voting if you vote for me as the only person who's going to make this decision. It is a team effort with the city council, and I watched the last meeting, and was impressed, very impressed, by how all of the city councilors at the time came together and were able to vote on something. Now, for me, the really most important vote was the vote that Tim referred to, which was a tax relief for people who were trying to build or redevelop in downtown Lebanon. And I assume it also includes West Lebanon, is that right, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about this other than the fact that the new friend of an old friend of mine is Dana Sylvie, who is trying to fix up Dr. Wood's old house right on the green. And he has done so, and he needs as much tax relief as he can possibly get. This kind of decision requires people with forethought, people with experience, people who will consider all options. I'd like to think that my vast experience around the world, living in many different places, I did not ever work for the armed services. I'm legally blind, so that would have been kind of hard, even if I thought I wanted to. But I've lived all over the world with my husband, who's a professor of anthropology now downstate. And one of the things I've learned to do is take things in context, to listen and to learn. If I'm lucky enough to be elected as the city council person for Ward 3, one of the things I plan to do is build on the extensive historical information I have about Lebanon. Why do I have this? Not just from 16 years living here, but because the first thing that I did back in 2000 was to call Robert Levitt. Those of you who remember Robert Levitt may have only known him when he was old and slightly crotchety, but he was the historical soul of this city. And he ran the Historical Society. He may have even founded it. Paul, you might be able to.
I'm not that old, I'm sorry.
Forgive me. But he was the historical soul, and I sat at his feet, metaphorically speaking, and listened to every story he could tell. I spent more than 10 years with the Historical Society before I even would have dared to try and do anything in city government. The only reason I'm not on it now was that I had to leave everything behind to take the only job that I could find during the recession. And that was out in southeastern, godforsaken Appalachian Ohio, where you saw poverty, the likes of which nobody in this room has probably ever personally experienced. It was so bad that it scared me. I wanted to go back to New England because I knew that even in the worst pockets of dire misery in our city, there were people taking care of other people. That's
Thank
what
you,
the
Sarah.
city council does.
Thank you. Tim?
So Al asked the perpetual tough question, which is how do you provide city services without bankrupting the taxpayers, right? And it's a question that we deal with every budget year, every day. I think that the only way you can do that in a way that it has to be done is to continually administer to and grow your tax base. And I think Sarah may have alluded to the fact that a lot of younger people, including my 3 children, by the way, have left the area, in part because there just wasn't enough here. One of the things we discussed at the last Economic Vitality meeting is how do we attract the millennials? How do we have those 20-something kids come back, want to start businesses, want to work for successful businesses? So I think that we have to do a number of things. One is that we have to have a climate that allows existing businesses here to want to stay and to want to grow here instead of going somewhere else, and we're working on that. Another one is to attract businesses. Now, you can't just go out and say, okay, I want you coffee shop and I want you manufacturer, but I don't want you. All the city can do is to set the stage for businesses who want to come here or to stay here and grow here, and that's what we're trying to do now. We can cut and cut and cut and cut, but if we don't build on the other end, we're just going to keep cutting and end up with no services at all. So, you know, one of the things I said last year when I ran was that one of my goals was to try to stabilize the tax rate as best we can. We did not do that this year. I think we have a 3% growth rate in the taxes, which is unacceptable, particularly in an area when you have very little inflation. So I guess the long and the short of it, Al, is we got to try to do everything we can to continue to grow the non-residential tax base in this city. And I am scared to death of the holes that I see on 12A that aren't getting filled. And I hope that we can work closely with our planning department to think about what does 12A look like 20 years from now. Because if it looks like 15 empty box stores, we got a real problem. So I don't know if that answered your question. I think there's a lot of challenges.
Okay. Anybody else another question? Yes, Kyle.
There's just a Ward 3 barrage going on right here. So, you know, I live in Ward 3 as well. I actually live between Sarah and Mr. Shoemaker. And yeah, Hardy Hill is probably the least plowed, but Stevens are certainly the last plowed. And I have no problem getting out of my driveway. I'm on the side of a hill. I'm on the downhill side of a downhill hill, if that makes any sense. But I guess this question's for Mr. Shoemaker. You talk about wanting to shut down the airport, which will cost us several $1 million, many millions of dollars. And you also say you want to spend more money with public works. So I'm just sitting here, you know, thinking about housing and feeding my 4 children, wondering how I afford taxes with you as city councilor. So what kind of plan do you have for all that?
Well, I know, you know, hiring extra people to go to the public works department, you know, takes money.
And extra people is extra equipment.
Right, extra equipment and all that. But when you have a lot more chiefs and not enough Indians, I think that has a lot to do with it. When you pay the number 2 man a big salary, and that salary can actually pay for a couple more guys at the bottom rung of the ladder. What's happened is that it's too heavy on the top. Too many people at the top in the public works department are taking all the money, and there's not enough guys at the bottom to do the work. And Hardy Hill is not the only road that doesn't get plowed. You know, Ward 3 extends Bank Street, everything, you know, up to School Street. You know, I traveled those roads. Those roads are horrible sometimes during the winter and when a winter storm. And not this winter, but the last 2 winters, it's been horrible. Everybody says, why can't Lebanon plow the roads? Because I keep telling them they don't have enough guys to plow. That's why I hear from the public works guys, they don't have enough guys. They have enough manpower, but they got another assistant director, you know, that gets a big check, and they had to let some guys go at the bottom to probably pay that guy. So there's some cost savings. I think they, you know, I work with, you know, Sarah was saying how she's experienced with the budgeting. But I work closely with the director of public works where our budgeting, because I control the work order system, I mine all the data. So when the budget committee is trying to cut us and we're trying to save money, I know sometimes you don't get what you always get. You know, my cemetery is operating on a $2,000 budget for 5 years. So I know how to cut money, but Yeah, it's an airport. Or are we going to continue to keep paying millions and millions and an airport never makes money? Why? It's insane.
So how would you pay for shutting it down?
Huh?
How would you pay
Well,
for
it might
shutting
be
down?
cheaper to pay to shut it down and get out of it than to keep on and just let it be a money pit. You know, it's like we made a devil. We deal with a devil 50 years ago, and now it's still bothering us today. You know.
50 years ago,
Thank you, Bill.
Lebanon
Okay,
Airport had
good.
higher
We're done.
passenger onboarding than Manchester Airport did.
Another question, there was, Al, let me get everybody out before I get back to you. Yes, ma'am?
Wendy Hall, Ward 3.
Yeah.
Again.
We got the whole ward tonight?
Being a school board member, I'd actually like to get off the airport topic. You had mentioned about trying to work better with the school board because we both affect the tax base. And so I just would like some thoughts on how you plan to do that or what you foresee in making a better relationship between the two.
Thank you. I'd like to have regular meetings rather than, one big summit a year. I'd like to have subcommittees of the school board and the council meet on a quarterly basis or better to discuss common issues. I'd like to discuss common purchasing of things like fuel, things like electricity, things like supplies that we don't do now. We have these two huge entities that just sort of sit out there and don't do much together, except occasionally argue, by the way. And my wife has been a teacher in Lebanon for 30 years, so I feel like I know it from the inside pretty well, as well as having 3 kids go through school. So I think the key thing is, in any relationship, is to have people meeting on a frequent enough basis that they get to know each other and they get to understand each other's positions. And that's why I'd like to see subcommittees of the 2 boards meet at least quarterly, if not monthly. And I'd certainly be thrilled to serve on one of those subcommittees.
Thank you. Frank?
A quick comment about the airport, maybe a lot of the issues tonight. I was on the council back in the 80s. You haven't solved any one of our problems, we left you, so good luck. Including the airport, which at that time, even the manager of the airport didn't know how big a hole it was in. It was pretty pitiful. But what my real question is there's been 2 articles about restoring the Tannery Dam. That bothers me. I was on the board of zoning board at the time, and we managed to stop the previous gentleman who wanted to put the dam in. There is no ponding area up that river, absolutely none. And I don't care about all that technology. I'm a former engineer. Technology fails, or I wouldn't have been in business. I wouldn't have had a job. So I would like to know what you people might think about restoring that dam, although some of you probably don't even know it ever existed.
I think Jim, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been reading about this proposal. I understand that the state has allowed it to move forward at least to the point of a hearing. I don't understand it either. I remember the Tannery Dam very well. I remember the area behind where the CCB is flooding on a routine basis. I don't understand how you can reconstruct a dam which presumes that it's going to pond water behind it and not create a flooding problem upstream. So I'm anxious to find out more, unless there's something that I don't understand. There's a lot of things I don't understand, but I can't imagine that I would ever support it. Even a run-of-the-river turbine, that didn't require a dam could potentially back up the river at some point. So I, too, am very, very concerned about it. I also think that that the river someday, maybe not today, will become something that we turn our faces to rather than turning our backsides to, right? We turned our backsides to it when I was a kid because of the rats and the fact that it ran in colors from the tannery and it smelled very, very bad. It doesn't do any of those things anymore, and one of the things I'd like to see the Economic Vitality Committee do, and one of the things I'd like to see the city do, is to make investments in making the river more of a central part of the city. So.
Al, did you have another question? I'm sorry, did everybody have a chance to ask a question? Okay.
I don't know if the other candidates wanted to address that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bill, did you?
Yeah, I've read about that, about the hydropower, that's what they want to do. I don't think I would agree with damming the river myself. I like it is. So that's my opinion about the river and the hydropower.
Sarah?
I confess, because my subscription to the Valley News ended suddenly, I have not read about the dam. I assume that's where the articles are. I will address that lacuna in due course, but the feeling that I have that the dam may be yet another example of a historic entity in town that has mixed reaction is what I'm getting from everybody today. In other words, it's a dam that could be used to stop flooding, is that correct? Or would it just add to the flooding?
The company wants to come in and do generate hydropower and sell that to the grid. I believe that's what it is.
Tim?
Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean.
Is that it?
Right,
Yeah.
it's not flood control, it's to generate hydropower.
It's to generate hydropower.
I'd like to answer a question. What was happening with the original Tannery Dam is every spring, Mayhem Flats went underwater, all the way up to Riverdale.
Okay.
On the other side of the river,
Yeah.
it got almost up to Hanover Street sometimes. They breached the dam and it got a little better. They took the dam out, we haven't had a flood since.
Okay, I have friends who live in Riverdale. The thing that surprises me about this is that when I was on the board of the Historical Society, the question of what to do with the West Lebanon rail yard and the salt house came up. Now, this was a fascinating discussion in whether or not one should spend money left to the society by several people, including Robert Levitt, to save one of the last examples of I'm sorry, I said salt, I meant a sand house that connected to a private railway. Well, I was very much opposed to it, but I didn't say anything about it because I really didn't know about it. It strikes me that if an outside company comes in here and wants to build a dam to create hydroelectric power that they then say they'll sell to us, is that right? You got to look carefully at the small print. It turns out that part of the problem, the reason why the sand house is falling apart now and was never saved, is because the railroad that ran was bought by somebody from another town. I think it was probably Claremont, right? And she wanted these things saved for business reasons. I'm sorry I don't know enough about it, but I would agree with both my associates here that spending money on something that doesn't show an automatic financial return to this city is exactly one of the things that we should stop considering. Or rather, we should consider it in all its glory, but then take very strong steps to make sure we know everything that's happening. The history of this city is fascinating. We were one of the largest mill towns in the state. But I don't propose we should go around saving all the old mills. The fact is that, even if they were still here, still standing, the fact is that we aren't that city from 100 years ago. Why do we need to build a dam where the Tannery Dam used to be? I don't know the answer to that yet, but I tend to learn.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions from the group? Who hasn't done first yet? Tom?
So I was going to ask this question, but then Mr. McNamara actually brought up the facing of the river. Do we face it? Do we face away? And we have many miles of river frontage in this city on the Connecticut and both sides of the Mascoma. And when you think about what we do that is taking advantage of the aesthetics of the river, there's very little. I can think of only one business that takes advantage of the aesthetics of the river, and that's Louie Louie, where they have a patio on the river. Maybe I'm forgetting something. We have little parks that nobody uses on the rivers, and I'm just wondering, do you have any ideas for any concrete things that the city can do to encourage facing toward the river?
Who wants to tackle that? Bruce.
Yeah, well, we're working on the Greenway, which is going to connect Lebanon to West Lebanon, and majority of that path is going to run along the river. And I believe that as that moves forward, that's going to bring forth a revitalization of that stretch of the Mascoma River. It's certainly a resource that we should look to make people able to appreciate rather than just acknowledge that it runs through our city.
Thank you. Tim?
Tom, a couple of quick things with regards to the Mascoma. One of the unique things that came out of the downtown visioning was the possibility of a pedestrian bridge that would link Hanover Street with the mall area and would cross the Mascoma upstream of where the existing crossing is, which is, I mean, the crossing that's there now is just essentially it's a vehicular crossing. It's not really pedestrian, it has a sidewalk. But I think for a relatively reasonable investment, we could do a pedestrian bridge across the Mascoma that would be very popular and would link Hanover Street with downtown in a way that it isn't linked today. And I think that even a small investment, relatively small investment like that, could be the catalyst that serves people to begin to look in that direction in a way that they don't now. The other thing is now finally that the bridge between West Lebanon and White River is complete and the temporary bridge, the temporary permanent bridge is coming down. You know, we now own that 2 acres where the old concrete company was down in the hole there beside the new bridge. And the concept there from the beginning has been to do a car top paddle boat launch down there. And I think that could bring a lot more attractiveness to the Connecticut and to that section of it. I also think that what David Clem is doing up on the north end of town, where he is going to have public access to the river down below the Wilder Dam, is also a way to get people to sort of be attracted to that area. That's called the old Beaver Meadow, and it actually is where the first settlers from Lebanon, Connecticut overwintered in Lebanon. So it has a historic basis too. So I think little things like that not force people, but encourage people to sort of interact with the river and maybe see it in a different way are the most important things that we can do, because they can serve as catalysts for other larger things in the future.
Yes, Sarah?
Just a PS, I guess. Coda. I don't believe that New York does most things right, but the one thing that they have done in my lifetime is to turn their faces back to the river. When I was growing up on the Lower East Side, nobody wanted to go on the docks where the 19th century riverboats used to lodge, to dock. It was dangerous. There were rats. You could fall into the river, which was worth your life in those days. But it's an extraordinary thing that when people put their minds to saving land or property that fronts water, if you build it, they will come. I was talking to 2 different people who sold up in downtown Lebanon and moved to Enfield so they could buy property on Lake Mascoma. And I kept thinking to myself, why couldn't we do something like that with our river? It's possible, but it needs involvement from so many different departments, divisions, groups of people. It is the kind of thing that the new planning committee is quite likely working on. And I think it's something that we as citizens, whether we're politicians or not, but we as citizens need to encourage them to do so. It's only going to happen if we show interest.
Thank you, Sarah.
Al, I guess you,
Bill,
I'm sorry.
Well, building next to the river conflicts with the Shoreline Protection Act of New Hampshire. They have strict requirements and buffer zones, what you can do now in a certain area from the lakes and rivers. So trying to build something near the river and turn it facing, you will have a hard time getting approval from the state. Like some of the homes on Mascoma Lake there, some of those homes were built right next to the shoreline. Well, if they want to rebuild that home, they have to rebuild it on the footprint of that home. They cannot never expand them, but it's based on the Shoreline Protection Act, so I think they'll have a little hard time.
Thank you. Al?
This is just kind of a follow-up to my question I asked you all earlier, and Mr. McNamara, maybe you could elaborate, because you started to allude to it a little bit. Impact fees in regards to businesses, we've talked a little bit about this, but my question to you is you have like companies like Walmart, Kmart, their impact fee is not appropriate to what it should be today. And I know there's some loopholes and some legal reasons as to why you can't do that. But is that something that you guys have kind of given up the fight on as far as trying to get that changed? Because their tax rate in comparison to, I pay $7,000 a year and maintain my own driveway, have my own well, you know, I use no city services unless I call fire or police. So I'm just trying to see if maybe there's a way to kind of offset that for those lucrative businesses to help out people in the community.
So you're talking about there's two things here, Al. There's a one-time impact fee, and then there's property taxes. So let me address them separately. I was on the planning board when we enacted impact fees. We had them years ago. It was not well administered. Fees were not utilized for what they were supposed to be utilized for. They had to be returned after 7 years. It was a disaster. So when we went back into impact fees a few years ago, we tried to be very careful and back into it very slowly and very cautiously and make sure that we were only collecting impact fees for things that we knew we could spend that money on, because you have to spend it on what you collected for. So in the case of businesses, the impact fees are only allocated to two things. One thing is the police department, paying off the bond on the police department building on Poverty Lane, and the second thing is the paying off the bond on the middle school. So I think over time our intention was and continues to be that we will slowly expand that as we find other things that are appropriate to devote impact fees to. But they only get assessed once. They get assessed when you initially go in. So you only get it once, and you have to spend it within 7 years by state law. So I think impact fees can play a part to try to offset those areas where one-time collection of money helps you to offset some of the businesses that those expenses cause. Property taxes are the more important thing. I think there's been a strong opinion over time that the businesses on 12A are undertaxed per their value. Part of that, in talking to the assessors, I understand to be that there has been so little turnover there. For instance, the Upper Valley Plaza is owned by the same company that built it in 1969. So there's been very, very little turnover, so there's no basis to up the property taxes in a lot of cases. I'm hoping we can look into that in more detail. What you don't want to do is to find a way to up the taxes so much that we start to lose even more of the development that we have down there now. So we all know intuitively, if we don't know for real, that it feels like our individual property taxes are more than they should be, given the level of commercial and non-residential development we have in the city. I agree with that 100%. I'm hoping we can take a much deeper dive into that as time goes by.
Thank you, Tim. Yes.
Mary Davidson, Ward 3, Hardy Hill. Since I've been pretty much here most of my life, 12A used to be a farm when I was a kid. And so as soon as they put businesses in, that's when we saw things change. And one of the things I think, the growth of business now, and I'm not talking stores, I'm talking about businesses who hire people with a good salary. That's amazing to see what Lebanon has been doing. And I really want to see that more than I want to see another box store come in or another mall that we don't need. And so I'm hoping that whoever gets this position will really work hard to get businesses to come here and to have those kids go to school here and to have those kids want to stay here because they have good jobs. So that's what I'm hoping from you guys. Thank you.
Mary. Carl?
Was that we got an answer, or was that just a statement?
No, just statement. She had no question.
I just wanted to
Get it off.
get it.
Yeah.
So, I guess my last question would be, where do you all see the future of Lebanon?
Great. And to whom are you going to ask that question?
All four. I'd like to
thank
know
you
where
very much.
I would like to know where they see Lebanon going, and perhaps a short elaboration of how we got there from here.
Don't want much, do you, Carl?
Nothing much at all.
Okay, Bruce?
Well, my vision of a future of Lebanon would be that it remains to be a wonderful place to live. It has jobs that people can work at, services that are reliable, taxes that are cheap, and an airport that doesn't cost us any money. How's that?
Good. Bill?
Yeah, I like to see the town of Lebanon grow responsibly. I like the small town. I want it's safe. I want to make sure it stays safe. I've lived in towns down in South Carolina where you had to get off the streets at night because only people that are out at nighttime in the downtown district, it was criminals and cops. And that's one thing you can do in Lebanon, which I love about, that you can walk anywhere downtown Lebanon to Salt Hill and to anywhere you want to go, or to your apartment on Bank Street where I used to live. I used to walk from Bank Street down to, Salt Hill or whatever, and you're not getting mugged or you're not getting robbed. And that's the great thing about Lebanon, because there's low crime here, and it's a great city to probably. Education is very good. Down south, education is not very good, and I like to see that continue. I like to see keep the small town feel, crime rate low, and yeah, I want lower taxes, but I know I want some more services, but it's the airport. Why do we need to maybe get out of that? Maybe try to find a way to get out of it. And I bet that will save a lot of taxpayer money in the future. Why do we continue to throw money at bad when it's never going to pay for itself?
Thank you, Bill. Sarah?
In the 16 years I've lived here, I wouldn't have bet any money in 2000 that Lebanon would have as many of the new businesses that have moved in here. True, there was a bookstore, George Sykes' bookstore, but for a variety of reasons, it didn't survive. There's a lot of different kinds of people coming to the Upper Valley. And I think the diversity of the Upper Valley is one of its best potential qualities. Those of you who know Carl Porter know that he goes back, how many generations, kiddo?
4 in Lebanon and another 5 in Plainfield.
Well, we'll forget about Plainfield for the moment. We'll just talk about Lebanon.
My children are the 4th generation,
Yeah.
and we're all
Yeah.
on the same road we all grew up on.
I got to know Carl when he was a city historian. And the fact is that the mix of old and new, the mix of traditional and cutting edge, the mix of careful city planning and some brilliant person, male or female, coming into town with a great new plan for another widget and willing to hire local people, whether they're skilled engineers or the guys who are going to sweep the floors. That's where our future should lie. And quite frankly, the only way we're going to survive as a city another recession is if everybody's on the lookout for what we can bring to this town. I'm using the word town as a synonym for city in this case. The bottom line is I want to see more independent companies open up in Lebanon. I'm not a big fan of box stores. I never have been. I've never worked in one. I've worked in many different small independent bookstores in Connecticut, Illinois, Chicago, and I believe strongly that whatever it is you're selling, whether it's books or widgets, if it's independently owned, as Tim said, you're going to bring the families along with the product, and those people will contribute to the town. I think this is important. I think we have to go after these people. We have to find the right fit. They have to want to live here. We want their product, whatever it might be. And a forward-thinking planning board, which I think we have right now, is probably the best way to do this. That, along with members of the school board and the council, together, working together. And I completely accept what Tim said about more meetings with the school board. Working together as a cohesive group of people, talking more frequently, that's what we need. Can it be done? I think so.
Thank you, Sarah. Tim?
So, Carl, I don't think I got you beat, but we've been here since the 1850s. I may be the last one. But, you know, I've said for a long time, I don't think Lebanon can really be successful until it decides what it wants to be when it grows up. You know, when I was growing up, we were very much a blue-collar town. We're now a much more mixed town, and I think that's a good thing in a lot of ways. I hope that we'll always be at least partly a blue-collar town, and I think we will. And that's how I wanted my kids to grow up. I think that we have to realize the tremendous assets that we have here and make use of them. So, for example, you know, a lot of the companies that you see that are successful here now originated with ideas from professors at the Thayer School. You look at Hypertherm, for example, a huge company that started in a garage from Thayer School professors. We have a tremendous resource at Dartmouth with people who have the ingenuity to start up new businesses and are being actively encouraged to do so now in a way that they never were before. So I'm very hopeful for that. You have situations that we got, like the one we recently got very, very lucky on, where we had a company at the airport that had spent tens of millions of dollars on a facility in the biotech industry, and it went bust. That could have left us with a very large, very specialized, very empty building, which would have been a real drag on the tax rolls if they decided to stop paying taxes on it. Thank God that it just happened to be exactly the facility with exactly the workforce that a Danish company, Novo Nordisk, was looking for. And they've come in and they've rehired folks. They're utilizing the facility. My understanding is they hope to expand. You know, we had the ambassador to the U.S. from Denmark here a couple of weeks ago. That's the kind of notoriety that we want to have, not just within the state, not just within the company, but internationally. And I think if we all work together, we can develop Lebanon's image to say, look, here is this great little place in the North Country of New Hampshire, you know, no sales tax, no income tax, at the convergence of two interstate highways, close to Canada, close to Boston, great recreational things, great cultural things. We need to be able to put all that together into a package and then get that information out to the world. Because if we do that, then we can begin to bring in the kind of innovative companies that we really want and need to see here to provide the kind of jobs that are going to keep your kids here, that might have kept my kids here, and that are going to pay the kind of taxes that we need so that we can all afford to live here.
Thank you, Tim. We'll now move to closing statements, minute and a half closing statements from each candidate. Number one, Bruce.
This has been very interesting. I've appreciated the questions. I appreciate you all being here. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve for 8 years, and I'm hoping to serve one more term. If I'm elected, this will be my last term. And I think that experience matters in a job like this, and it is a job. There are over 40 meetings, closer to 50 a year. And I'm hoping I can have support to continue to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Bill?
Well, I was kind of different when I graduated from high school. I did not want to live in my hometown all my life. I wanted to go out and see the world. So that's the reason why I joined the Navy. I figured I want to go see a lot of places before I finally got to a place in my time in my life that I wanted to retire or settle down and get close to it. So, yeah, when I joined the Navy, I went and told my dad I'm not coming back. You know, and I've lived in a lot of great places. I've seen, I've worked for a lot of other towns, you know, and see a lot of other ideas. I bring ideas outside of Lebanon, so I I know I'm running for Ward 3, and I want to be your counselor for Ward 3. I want to bring a conservative view. I want to say our taxes are over $8,000. This went up another $800. So I feel for you for everybody wants their taxes lower, but there has to be some way that we can do that and still maintain a high level of city services like the Public Works Department. I think the Public Works Department is really key. Where like in Enfield, Public Works Department is the highest budget, then you go police, and then you go fire. But it's not like that here in Lebanon. But like I said, in the airport, I am totally against the airport. I don't see why that if it keeps losing money, and it keeps losing the city money, why keep it? Yeah, if we try to get out of it, we might have to pay some money back, but it might be cheaper in the long run just to pay the money back or to close it down. You know, it's just silly to keep wasting money. So.
Sarah.
I think it's a real shame that all three of my colleagues here cannot all be on the city council. I have found tonight to be a fascinating, stimulating, and really intriguing set of conversations. Ultimately, who becomes your city councilor, whether it's from the famous Ward 3 or Ward 2 or Ward 1, is in the hands of you, the voters. And I would be happy with anybody's decision. As I say, I didn't plan to run, but I was really impressed by people who did and who gave back to this city. And I've spent 16 years taking from Lebanon, and I just would love the opportunity sometime, and it may not be city council, it may be something entirely different, to be able to give back to this city that I have loved, that I have returned to live, giving up work to do so, because this city has captured my heart. And the same is true of my husband. He has already been working with the city in ways that I think have helped. Now it's my turn. And if you agree, then you will elect me. If you don't, you've got a very good alternate in Mr. Shoemaker. Either way, the city's going to benefit.
Thank you, Sarah. Kim.
Well, thank you for coming out. I'm in the unique position this year of running unopposed. I'm not sure what that means, but so I'll ask for your vote anyway. But I'd more ask you to please, please, please get involved with the city. There's no way we can't do this together. Everybody works hard, and the last thing anybody ever wants to do is to come out at night. But you know, I found it to be very enlightening and very beneficial over the last several years to do it first on the planning board, then on the council. You know, if there's any little way that you can volunteer, whether it's on a board or a committee, I ask you to please give it a try, because we've got to all work together to get where we need to get, and the more heads, the better.
Thank you very much. Thank you, candidates, both school board and city council. And thank you, Ward 3, for turning out as you did.
Oh, Ward 3.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed both your intense